Oh my gosh, that honey! Look at that honey! So I finally decided to bite the bullet and upgrade from my 13-inch base MacBook Air. Now the main thing that was holding me back from upgrading in the past, other than not wanting to spend all the money, was something stupid in that it didn't come in gold. And of course I would prefer to have gold, and since the MacBook Air is gold and it was working fine, I was like, okay, let's just stick with that because we get gold. Sorta. This is like a copper, rose gold, whatever. It was close enough. That being said, the M1 MacBook Air has been working pretty wonderfully in most cases, although sometimes recently I've been noticing some slowdowns where I have to restart it. I start getting warnings that the RAM's running out, and it's not really the best experience overall when you're trying to do some intense editing on a deadline. With that being said though, we can see that the 13-inch MacBook Air is significantly smaller than the MacBook Pro box, coming in at just over 16 inches of size. Wow, big difference. So right here in front of me I have the 16-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 Max with 10 CPU cores, 32 GPU cores, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and 1 terabyte of SSD storage. So it's maxed out as far as the M1 Max chip goes, just not with the RAM and the storage. That stuff gets pricey, and I think 32 is going to be a worthy upgrade from 8. For the most part, I just want to have a super smooth experience overall, as well as the extra real estate that comes with the 16-inch display. I mean, this thing already feels heavy. I mean, the MacBook Air, obviously, it's like as light as air. This thing is almost double the weight, coming in at just under 5 pounds. The MacBook Air is about 2 3/4 pounds. And as far as the color goes, since I made a huge deal about it, I did opt for the silver model. It looked pretty nice in the pictures. I normally would have went for space gray, but silver looked pretty nice, so we'll see. Oh wow, okay, so the silver actually does look very nice, and this Apple logo is pretty big. Okay, I guess it's not actually that much bigger, but it's still pretty mind-boggling. Of course, inside the box we also have a pretty good length braided USB-C to MagSafe charging cable, which is very nice to see. I've never actually used MagSafe before, but I'm actually pretty excited about it. Why not? I like to have my USB-C ports open and ready to use. We also have this really small getting started guide. I mean, pretty much the same stuff as any other MacBook, as well as this huge, this paper's really tight, as well as, okay, I guess it wasn't, as well as this huge 140 watt power brick with one USB-C port. So you're able to fast charge about 50% in about 30 minutes with this thing. 140 watts with the MagSafe cable. It's limited to about 100 watts with the USB-C cable, which is still plenty of power. And for the most part, I'm probably not going to be using this because I do have hubs and everything set up, and those usually get the job done. So it looks like for the most part, this is all we got. Very simple. And now on to the MacBook, looking huge. Quick size comparison. Look, it just engulfs the MacBook Air. How thick is it actually? Whoa. Substantially thicker. Okay, not too much thicker, but you know, still thicker. As far as the weight goes, it does definitely feel heavier, although, you know, not bad, especially for what you're getting. Over on the left side, we do have a dedicated MagSafe charging port, along with 2 USB-C Thunderbolt 4 ports, and a headphone jack. It's on the left side this time. Over on the right side, a full-size SD card slot, which will definitely come in handy, another USB-C Thunderbolt 4 port, and an HDMI 2.0 port, which would come in handy if I needed in a pinch. Nothing over here on the back side other than this hinge, and then nothing on the front other than this little opening so you can pop up the screen with one hand. Down on the bottom, engraved MacBook Pro branding, which is different from the Air that has nothing, and some little rubber stoppers, as well as ventilation grills on the side. Now, typical Apple, very basic design, simplistic. Let's see what's inside and see if this passes the one-hand open test. It should. It's heavy. It does. Wow, those speakers are actually pretty amazing. This screen is massive and extremely sharp. This keyboard, I forgot. Oh my god, the trackpad, I always forget, but the 16-inch trackpad is huge. Watch, let me just pull up my MacBook Air real quick, get it side by side. Just look at the size of the trackpad. I think if you turn this to the side, it's almost like 2 of them. That's pretty amazing. Now, some people, including me, hate using trackpads, but when it comes to Apple trackpads, I can actually use them. They're very intuitive, very responsive, very high quality feeling. Every time I've used a Windows trackpad, it just feels super plasticky and cheap and just doesn't work, and I have to pull out a mouse. But ever since I switched to MacBooks, no problem, and I actually enjoy it. You know what? I actually forgot about the notch because right now it's blending in with the wallpaper, and because we do have a mini LED display, it's effectively invisible. And to be honest, if you're worried about the notch, obviously you've never used the MacBook with the notch because it's just in the menu bar, which makes sense. It's not taking up any space, you're actually gaining space in your work area. This screen though is massive. Now, I wasn't sure if I would like the rounded edges of the screen because it kind of cuts in to your work area a little bit. Although on the top, since the menu bar is going to be up there, I guess it wouldn't. But, oh, wait. Okay, I just forget what I just said because at the top it's going to be the menu bar where it's rounded. At the bottom, it's still squared off, which is a weird design. Although it actually, I guess it makes sense because the menu bar is going to be up there. Who cares? And it adds to the aesthetics.
To use English as the main language.
Yo, Siri! That sounded crystally clear though. Keyboard feels great. All right, so let me max out the display. This thing is bright and now I can see the notch. Now, one thing about the notch that I'm not liking is that the menu bar comes down below the notch instead of being even with the notch, although I guess in the case if it ever goes completely black, then it'll still blend in, but I would have preferred if when it's lighter colored like right now, it was even. This screen though, super sharp, vibrant, looks amazing. It's a definite upgrade from the M1 Air, which I thought was already very nice, but this one is an HDR display. And it's massive. I gotta go check out a video. All right, HDR video right here. Let's max it out. Wow, this looks amazing. The blacks are great, sharp. Oh my gosh, that honey, look at that honey. I honestly can't tell. I know this isn't an OLED, but the black levels look the same to me. Yeah, in the dark, still pitch black. Looks amazing. I gotta test the speakers real quick. What you want? Of course, I have to do a side-by-side speaker comparison because I thought the MacBook Airs are actually very good. They sound clear, but not super loud, which I found out when I was trying to watch a movie recently. So let's check this out. MacBook Air first. What you want? Okay, sounds good. Now the MacBook Pro. Oh! Definitely a much deeper and richer sound. And now back to the Air. Yo, that's pretty insane. This sounds like crap compared to the 16-inch. Just saying. Night and day difference. If you have a MacBook Air, don't listen to a 16-inch. You know what's crazy? I was just browsing the web and I didn't actually make it full screen for the first time, and I didn't even notice until just now when I realized I could see the wallpaper. On the MacBook Air, I guess because the screen's so much smaller, I always had to make it full screen to enjoy it, but here, it's basically the same size without being full screen, so that's pretty impressive. Alright, so it's been about 2 weeks since I've been using my new MacBook Pro 16-inch M1 Max with 32 gigabytes of RAM and 32 graphic cores. The good news is, it is exactly how I was expecting and hoping it would be, and it just flies through anything I throw at it. I've been editing all my videos, including this one, on this machine in 4K 60 and even some in HDR Dolby Vision, and it's been flying without any hesitation whatsoever. Although there is one thing I noticed that kind of surprised me, and it's when I was editing my 4K 60 HDR Dolby Vision videos for my food channel, and it's a pretty simple thing that's going on. For whatever reason, it does start dropping frames when it goes from the intro of the food channel into the actual video through that transition. Now keep in mind, this is when I'm editing at better quality. On my MacBook Air, I was never able to edit at better quality. I always had to go for better performance, which made the video not look as crisp and clear as it could. But with this machine, I'm able to fully edit get 4K 60 HDR footage in better quality without an issue other than the drop frames from this transition. Now, the only reason I can see that this is happening is because it makes a bunch of different squares of the same video at 4K 60 and puts them all together, and it's trying to process all of that data at the same time. But you know, it's just a little bit of a snag and not an issue, and doesn't happen when you have better performance. Now, that being said, I'm not really watching that. I just said it and forget it, so it doesn't actually even matter. However, when it comes to rendering out all these 4K 60 videos, whether it's HDR10, Dolby Vision, just 4K 60, whatever I throw at it, it takes about 50% of the time it would take to watch the video. For example, a 10-minute video takes about 5 minutes to render, whether it has HDR or not. That's surprisingly fast, because in comparison, on my MacBook Air M1 model, it definitely took more time. It used to take at least the amount of time of the video to render out that video in 4K 60. With HDR, it took longer, and if I tried Dolby Vision, it's impossible. It actually took hours for a 1-minute video. So with the MacBook Pro, all those encoding engines and all those extra cores and the extra RAM definitely come in handy, and it makes everything a breeze. And one of the things that is really surprising to me is that I still, in the past 2 weeks, editing all my content the exact same way I would normally do it, I have not heard the fans once. It's very impressive. The CPU meter and everything, it doesn't even go super high while I'm rendering. I can edit thumbnails in Photoshop while the video is rendering. I can do a number of different things while the video is rendering. Now, when I say rendering, I mean exporting, and I've just been stuck with that since back in the day because that's what we used to call it, rendering. So just keep that in mind. It's not rendering it on the timeline. It's unrendered on the timeline, just exports out of the project into the final file. And then coming up to the screen is amazing. It's not OLED, but I wouldn't be able to tell if you didn't tell me. We have very dark blacks. The notch disappears into the darkness. You can't even tell it's there while you're using it. To be honest, I don't remember ever looking at it after the unboxing. So that's pretty cool. Now, although the screen looks great, the colors are amazing, HDR looks fabulous. The one thing I did notice is when I tried the Ufo test at 120 Hertz, it didn't look as smooth as I was expecting. It looked a bit jittery. And when I looked this up, it turns out the MacBook screen doesn't have the best response time. It's somewhere along the lines of 90 milliseconds, which is very high. But in the day-to-day usage, you don't really notice it. You're just not getting a super smooth experience as you would expect, especially if you're coming from a ProMotion display on your iPhone. But watching content and doing everything looks fine. When you come to game, you might have a bit of an issue because of the slower response time, but nobody's really buying this machine to game on, so it's not really a big deal. For using this for productivity, flawless, amazing, wonderful. Now, other than the screen, the one other thing that is annoying me is the trackpad. Coming from the MacBook Air, if you happen to do the same thing, you could probably agree with me on this, but instantly when I started using the trackpad, I noticed the haptic feedback is a bit weaker than it is on the MacBook Air. I even increased it to the maximum amount of vibration, and it still doesn't match that of the MacBook Air. Feels not as good, not as premium. I really love the MacBook Air's haptics when you're using the trackpad. Now, the good news is this trackpad, huge. Look at it compared to my hand. It's wonderful. It's about double the size of a MacBook Air trackpad, and it really comes in handy when you're editing content. And other than that, everything is great except the color. Like you saw, I came from a gold MacBook Air. I really want a gold MacBook Pro, but they don't exist, so I opted for the silver, although I'm not sure I'm digging it. I might actually have to go trade it out for the space gray, because the silver, I've never been a huge fan of silver, and space gray sounds like I'd like it a bit better, even though it's not gold either. The good news is, of course, you can get a skin and put it on here and make it whatever color you want, but I personally just like to keep it simple, straightforward, clean, sleek. Although, you know, maybe one day I will go for a skin. Who knows? I just don't like installing them and trying to get it perfect because it drives me crazy. But other than that, wonderful machine. I'm loving it and really have no complaints. I'm going to be using this for years to come, and I'm happy with it.